Ryan Tubridy.
Hello, Dermot.
Thank you for joining me
Thanks
on the
for
Mindful podcast.
No, and congratulations on it. I think it's great. I think it's good to get inside the head and give people, a steer maybe in life and the world, and hopefully I'm of some use to you.
Yeah, well, you definitely will be, because you were in everybody's homes and everybody's heads for so long here in Ireland.
Yes.
And then it's a bit like, when your best friend emigrates, you feel left out because we don't know what your life is like now. And so hopefully we're going to get into some of that. But first up, I'd like to ask you, last year, you got a phone call from the late, great Sinead O'Connor.
Yeah.
She said that you suggested that perhaps you had been mugged by God in a hoodie.
Brilliant.
Which was an amazing way to phrase it, in that she was suggesting that sometimes the universe presents us with things that are dark and troubling, but there's something in there. There's opportunity.
Yes.
Do you feel that way now, a year and a bit on?
Yeah, a little context, if you want, to geographical or physical on what happened with that phone call. I was in the Abbey Glen Hotel with my cousins in Clifton, chatting away, having a beer. It was in the early evening, so it was sober.
Yeah.
And the phone rang and it was Sinead, and I said, "Excuse me, I've got to go." And I stepped into an office, and a beautiful office. I mean, I say an office. I could see Clifton in front of me, and the beautiful trees, and it was summer, so it was kind of still bright. And I had just been through quite a bit, and she had been watching bits of it, and she called me and she said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm all right. How are you?" She said, "I'm okay. I'm in London." And I said, "Great. How's it going over there?" She goes, I've got a flat here, and I really like it. And she said, you know what's happened to you, don't you? And I said, "No." She said, "Well, you were just mugged by God in a hoodie." And I said, "I don't really know what that means." And she said, "Well, you this guy came up to you, excuse me, with this hood over his head, kicked you, punched you, kept going, and walked away. And as he was walking away, took the hoodie down, and it's God saying, you needed that." And I suppose it's a really rock and roll way of saying a blessing in disguise.
Yes.
It's a very Sinead way of saying that. And I said, "Do you know what? I feel better already just hearing you say that, because I'm going to have to prepare for another phase of my life as a result of what's happening here." And that was about the summer a year ago, if you know what I'm saying. And then she passed away soon after that, which was bloody horrible,
Yeah.
Because I don't like to overstate my friendship with people, particularly famous people, because I think it's a bit crass. And I don't want to cheapen their own friendships, their proper friendships with their real friends. But we were close, more than the average friendship from showbiz, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And I cared about her, and I believe she cared about me. And she was fragile. I called her the Cassandra of Ireland, because in ancient Greece, Cassandra used to tell everyone what's going to happen, and everyone said, "You're mad," and then it would happen, and she'd say, "It's a bit late now," but I felt she was like a Cassandra. She was a truth teller.
She sure was.
Anyway, so that's the context. Excuse me, Jeremy. That's the context of that time. And your question is, was she right? Was I mugged by God in a hoodie? Yeah. I think I felt very sorry for myself at the time for a long time about that. I can't believe I was mugged. But
wasn't that justified? Like, isn't it okay to feel sorry for yourself when you're experiencing something like that?
Maybe. When I see other people feeling sorry for themselves, I often think, I think I was allowed to have a bit of it, but maybe I had a little bit too much of it. But get on with it. There's a great song. My karaoke song is "That's Life" by Frank Sinatra, and you're riding high in April, shot down in May. But then he also says, each time I find myself lying flat on my face, I pick myself up and get back in the race. That's life. And that's what I see. I see that song plays in my head quite a lot.
Where did that come from, do you think? Other than Frank, that necessity. That voice that comes in and goes, "Come on now, back on the horse."
It's necessity. You have the choice. You could curl up and take to the bed, as we say, or you can get going. And I needed to get going.
Was that family, do you think? Was that an old... Sometimes these voices are...
Yeah, I know, I appreciate
parents
that.
or authority figures, a teacher, or is it just in your makeup?
I think it must be genetic, but I couldn't attribute it to one person. But we're a family of doers. We walk fast, we talk fast, we think fast. And we're early to the party and we leave the party early. I don't know what that means, but we did. My dad used to arrive at the 3 to 5 parties at 4:30, and I'd look out the window and go, "Oh, it's over already." And, and we're like that now. We kind of first meet at 7, we'd be there at 10 to, and then everyone would be there at midnight. We'd be gone since 11. I don't know what that means, but that's what we are. So we like to do things, and we're doers. I always have a book in my hand or a podcast in my ear, or, I love soaking it all up. I want more information. I want more interesting things in life.
Well, if God came in the hoodie and brought about change, whether you were wanting it or not.
Yeah.
Looking back, do you think you were resistant to change?
Yes, I do.
In your life generally, and this kind of whooshed you into a new place?
Yeah, I was coasting a little bit. I made the decision, the big decision I made was to leave the Late Late Show.
Yeah.
A year before my contract allowed it to. And I got it into my head, it's time to leave. I was kind of falling slightly out of love with it. I think it was time to leave, and that was fine. And I would have stayed on the radio. And I know what I would have done is I would have said, I think I might have a look in the UK and see if there's something shaking there. And if I hadn't been mugged by God in a hoodie, I'd still be in Radio 1 saying every day, I think I might have a look in the UK. I think I might have, then I'll be 54, then I'll be 56, and then I'll be 60, and then I'll be dead. So, yeah, I needed a shove. I got one.
I don't think you're going to die at 60.
Some would say I died years ago.
You kind of shortened your potential lifespan.
But I did, didn't I? Gosh. I know I don't intend going anywhere today or tomorrow, but who knows? It does happen.
Well, isn't it perfectly natural? I mean, I can definitely relate because I had a perfectly good radio job. I guess similar to the Late Late Show, things are humming, you're doing really well. To everybody else, your job looks amazing. There's people chomping at the bit to get into that seat. And you can be kind of sitting there almost guilty, thinking, I'm not fired up about this gig. And there are people who would murder to get into this seat. And certainly when I felt that when I looked at my team, I was like, I should be bringing the same enthusiasm every day that they are, but I can't seem to do it. There's something in me. I call it my inner potato. Yeah. Because it felt like there was a heavy potato sitting in the pit of my stomach, just letting me gently know you're ready for a change.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you listened to that potato. I mean, to keep the analogy going.
After a while, you can't ignore the potato.
Yeah, because it's getting too big. It's like a potato field.
Yeah. And then you think, well, you know what? If I'm not 100% enthusiastic about this seat that I'm sitting in, and other people would love to be here. And I heard Annie Mac in the UK talk about that as well. That's how she felt when she was with the BBC. Then maybe I should free up that seat.
Well, that was entirely where I was going. I felt I'm going to let myself down, the audience down, my team down, and no one's winning. So out you go, and I did, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made because I was good to go.
Yeah,
and I had a
Did
lovely.
you feel free after?
I felt completely liberated. My face changed. And my DNA changed.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do at the time, the ironies, was to turn down the volume of being recognised and all that sort of thing. Because when you present the Late Late Show, regardless of who you are, and this is not an arrogant thing to say, but it just happens to be the case, but people recognise you wherever you go. And I enjoyed that tremendously, meeting people and selfies and everything. But I just felt I was hitting 50, and I said, I'd love to be able to be gone from the show. I got it into my head before I'm 50, and it was 3 days before my 50th birthday.
What do you think you've learned about yourself over the last year?
I'm more resilient than I realised. I'm much freer to talk openly about my emotions and who I am. I think that's really nice. I don't suffer fools as much as I probably would have. I'm a big fan of the hard yes and the hard no, which I was never good at. I was always, I'll see what I can do. Let me try people please. And now I just say, no, I don't want to do that, or I can't do that. I now see there's more clarity. And I'm still getting used to just a different version of myself.
Yeah. Well, let's look into that different version of yourself. What is your day-to-day life like in the UK? Describe your average
Dermot,
day.
I live by the sea in Ireland.
Yeah.
And I love the sea and the sea breeze. And when I go on holidays, I go to the other side of Ireland, to the sea, to Connemara. Yeah. I love the sea. And I took up running little 5Ks. I'm not a running bore. It's just a 5K. And we can talk about that as well if you like. And I'd go run down the end of the West Pier in Dún Laoghaire and back, and that's to my door. That's it. That's the end of it. And I love that. So you're asking me, what am I doing now? Now I'm on a tube, like a sardine, going from St. John's Wood to London Bridge at 5 to 10 to 8 in the morning, trying to read either, it depends, and the tube journey, you know how busy it is on the tube by what I've got in my hand. So if it's jammed, it's a magazine.
Mm-hmm.
If it's fine, it's a book so I can sit down. And if it's unbearable, it's just the earphones, because I can only listen because I don't have space to move my hands.
You have T-Rex arms.
T-Rex arms.
Yeah.
So the day is, I live in Abbey Road. As a Beatles fan, this is really important to me.
That is
I can see the studios from the kitchen in my flat. We don't have apartments in London, just flats.
I know those flats.
And they're,
aren't they the what were corporation flats?
I think they were back in the day.
In Victorian times.
Yeah. And now they're, well-to-do.
But I went there. It's so fresh in my mind because my son is a massive Beatles fan.
Good man.
And we did the walking across the
so that's my, I walk past that zebra crossing every day. The studio's on the right, zebra crossing every day. The Beatles fans, like your son, are the nicest fans. They're all gathered around. They're nervous wrecks trying to cross the road. I know. There's people beeping. I see it every day.
Whenever you see the photos of people doing it, it looks like it's a really sleepy, quiet, leafy road.
No, it's a proper road. It's a busy road.
In reality, if you zoomed out of the shot, there's a million tourists all sort of perched, ready to run onto the road at the nearest gap. And it's just a slew of angry men in white vans
That's
going,
exactly.
Get off the bloody road!
Yeah. I don't care if it's the Beatles. And so that is, you've described it perfectly. And that's what, I turn left then and I get to St. John's Wood tube station and I get the tube in and I get into work and I meet my producer. It's funny, I worked for an hour on RTE radio with a beautiful team of 6 or 7, and now it's me and Connor. Nice guy, honorary Irishman over there.
What's that like when you find yourself, you're in this new environment, you're essentially playing a different role, your learning curve is now steepened every day because you're getting used to new environment, new ways of doing things, new culture, even though we think we're the same as the British, but we are
a different planet.
Yeah. Like, how did you find that change?
It was borderline impossible. I mean, traipsing around, London looking for accommodation. I mean, it's not biblical, any room at the inn, but just looking for some. And I had friends who were looking for me and stuff like that.
Does age come into your head for those things? I mean, if you're in your 20s, you kind of do those things and you assume this is part of what a 20-something-year-old does. But certainly, I can relate. We're exactly the same age.
Yeah, 51.
The last year for me has been nothing but an upward learning curve. I'm learning new stuff every day.
But are you enjoying this is the thing, are you enjoying the hike, or is the rain and sleet coming on your face? Are you coming down on your face?
I think you have to embrace both.
Yeah.
It's a bit like flinging yourself into the sea. A lot of it you don't feel like doing it, if particularly if it's cold.
Yeah.
But it enlivens you. It wakes you up.
I went for a mad run yesterday, so I'm going to do 2. I went for quite a big run yesterday for me, and I said I wouldn't be a running bore, but the point I'm making is a meteorological and emotionally related story.
Yeah.
Whereby when I went out, it was beautiful. It was, and you remember how wet it was the last couple of days. And I said, it just missed the rain. I went down the East Pier and I said, this is great. I'm going to do this run. I said, will I do the other pier as well, which is a lot for somebody like me, such an amateur. And I went down, the rain started pelting down. I said, now you've got a choice. You can turn back and go home and having done 6.5 or 7 kilometers, or you can just run through that sleet to the pier. Look at that lighthouse. It's far, but it's not that far. And you come back and you know what? You're going to have a hot shower. You're going to have a coffee. You're going to have completed over 10K and you're going to feel great. What do you think I did?
You kept going.
Thank God you said that. Because I did keep going, and I looked like a drowned rat, and I got home and I did have the shower and I did have a coffee and I did feel great. That is a metaphor for the last year. Looking around London, didn't feel great. It felt wet and grey and dark, and I was in a new city and I missed everybody. And then as the days went on, it was quite interesting because, to use the metaphor of light and dark, it was December. Though I started the job on January the 2nd on Virgin Radio, which broadcasts at Q102 here in Ireland. And as the days got brighter, coming into February and March, and family were coming over to visit, and suddenly they didn't feel so far away, and I started to really like the people I was working with, and they were really warm, and the listeners started coming on board. Our figures went up, and I suddenly went, well, this is kind of interesting. I thought the museums are great, and the art galleries and the bookshops, they're endless. And I was doing my little runs down to through Regent's Park and up Primrose Hill and all these places I'd only ever read about but didn't know. And I could see Camden and Clapham, and I started seeing Irish people on the tube, and they'd be kind of going, how are you, Tubbs? And I'm going, Jesus. But here we are, and it was really sweet. And then I found a pub in Soho called the Devonshire, and that's Oisin, who runs that, became a friend, and I became friends with some people I wasn't expecting to be friendly with. And not a whole new social group, but just... And then I had my own friends here. And the sun came out again. The sun came out again. And I found myself going, this is quite good fun. Then I started a bookshelf podcast about books, which is my Marvel superpower in my head. And I really enjoyed that. And suddenly I was in London. I had Brian Cox and David Walliams and, Alistair Campbell and all these kind of people who I'd been listening to or seeing. And I'd interviewed for 10 minutes. But now I had an hour with them. I was kind of like, this is beautiful. Then I come home and I do some podcast interviews here. And I was going, you're getting the best of both worlds. You're on Abbey Road. You're on past Paul McCartney's house every day, you sick stalker. And then, but it is sick. But and I started getting, I said, this is good. And now and
there
again.
he is again. He's outside. He's running by again. That strange Irish man.
Nancy, call the guards. The man's sick. He's here again. It's Tuesday, midnight. He's not well.
Yeah, I made him sound like an extra from Brookside.
I watch him so much because it's just Paul, because he's old Paul.
Yeah,
and the voice is a bit crooked. So I grew to love London. I had to learn to love it.
Were you lonely when you went over?
Yes. I always said I'm okay being alone. I spend a lot of my time alone, even here. But never lonely. So yes, there were times, but I would hate to say that it was desperate. It wasn't. It was more momentary. And I'd kind of go, ooh, this is, I can't call in to, that kind of way.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, who are you calling into anyway? No one calls into anyone. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. No one calls into anyone and knock on their door. Like, that's stupid.
I know. People think it's weird, actually.
It's Paul McCartney again. Well, here he comes. Yeah. So, what are you... So I stopped that. I miss my girls so much. My daughters are 25 and 19. One of them is in college. One of them's got a full-time job and they're happy. And they love their dad and they love their mum. And they don't need me going... do you fancy?
Yeah.
Do you want to go and see Gladiator 2?
That's a really interesting thing. I think we can do that. We can have that romantic vision of some of our relationships. Like, my dad died in 2003.
Yes.
And I sometimes I pine for these chats. I'd love to have deep chats about, like, what were you like at 50, and what was going through your head. And he overcame alcoholism, and what did he do for his, with his mind to get over difficult scenarios. And you can think that we'd be sitting down, in check shirts, on a hay bale, having these deep and meaningfuls. But in reality, we mightn't have had those conversations at all if he was still around. Also, he would have just said, "Here, hold the torch," while he fixed.
But
something.
also, he arguably, I mean, obviously, I didn't know your dad. I'm sorry to hear he passed away, but he might have been equipped emotionally, or at least linguistically, with the language. I mean, I remember when my dad died, I was saying to my friends, my dad was he actually was emotionally intelligent, and he wasn't afraid of a hug, but we were talking about the lack of hug. And our dad's generation, I described them as being the last sting of the Victorian wasp. They weren't meant to be demonstrative people. Now, I think our generation has overcorrected a little bit, and certainly the next generation, maybe as parents, it's just probably a little bit too much. I mean, I'm clingy. I'm like a bad boyfriend going, "Hi, I got a text." I mean, it's pathetic. That's actually, it was a friend of mine. I'm borrowing that from a friend of mine who described it like that. Sorry, I'd hate to be, I'd hate to steal it from him. And he said that, when your daughter texts you, and you go, "Ooh, it's great. I got a text." You feel so loved. You bathed in their love. But anyway, it's a different story, different generations.
Yeah. You obviously you're talking about your girls, and I suspect, looking in from the outside over the last year, if you could pick the things that helped you keep it together, that script at the back of your head that no matter how shit things get, I know things are going to be okay. And generally we rely on certain pillars. I'm guessing your family
Well, look, it's
got to be that big pillar. I'm the youngest of 6, so I get it.
There's 5 of us.
Yeah.
We're extraordinarily close. And people, when I was here, we used to meet pretty much once a week for a pint or two, and and that was we call them therapints. And we'd sit down and go, so what are you reading, and who you hanging out with, or how's work?
That's kind of unique, because a lot of
very unique. Very unique. I can't believe I said that. Unique. Yeah.
There are families with many siblings, and they would tear lumps out of each other, or they have to sort of be economical with their time spent together. It's not always the way with siblings. We're
just very lucky. I mean, they spent 3 of them spent a lot of time abroad, so it wasn't ever thus, but about 15 years ago, everyone seemed to land back together, and we just have been inseparable ever since. And they were, they were the as you say, pillars. They were the pillars. And my partner was a pillar, and the girls were a pillar. So if it was a temple of doom, these were the pillars that kept the roof on. We got through it, and my mum was pretty good. She was unwell at the time, so that was pretty tricky.
How is she doing now?
She's great. Thank you for asking. She's doing okay. And she was in a hospital, and I was going in and out of hospital in between Oireachtas hearings. And I went down to she said, you wouldn't get the paper from me. I said, of course. I went down and I looked at the papers, having studiously, and I went, shit. And I went back up. I said, no, funny, they're all sold out. Yeah, that was tricky. But and I stopped.
They're the things you don't think about.
Of course you don't, because you're
going
a cartoon.
Through that. You're trying to look after your mum, which is the most human, personal thing.
Yeah, in between it all, yeah.
And then trying to shield her from
trying to give her the
nastiness
good
stuff. That's in the newspaper. The things you just don't think about.
You just think that people are cartoons, and that's one of the nice things about the jobs that we have done, is that you meet a lot of people who you heretofore would have thought were a jerk or beautiful or whatever, and then you meet them in the flesh and you go, oh, okay, you're such and such a person, and that's interesting.
You've mentioned your podcast, The Bookshelf.
Yeah.
I'm always so delighted when I see people align even more deeply with their passions and navigate that space between it being something fun and nourishing, and it then also being a job.
And a joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And when those worlds combine, I guess that's what I've been trying to do over the last few years, is take my passions, turn them into a job, but not lose sight of how much I am passionate about this stuff. Just like having this conversation with you about these things is exactly where I want to be. Good. It's my sweet spot.
Yeah.
And I can see that when I look and listen to your podcast and The Bookshelf. Explain what that feels like. Long form interviews, people that you admire and want to have a good poke around without having to cut to the ads or a live band, or the next guest.
Well, the problem with the chat show is that it's so constricted, and it makes for a very artificial conversation. 15 minutes with Russell Crowe, and with his background and storied career and what have you, and you go, how can I interview this person?
I know. And you got to get the movie or the book in or whatever else.
That's 7 minutes.
Yeah,
and then you're saying, by the way, Gladiator. He's going, well, we're not going to talk about Gladiator. Well, yeah, or what have you. So the Bookshelf comes along, and it was in my head for a few years. It was one of those, I must do that.
Yeah,
I must, and I'm a devil for I must do that. But
well, you're also busy. You had 2 full-time jobs. I think you're being hard on yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
That just because we are used to doing it, that it doesn't drain us of energy. Like, one of the things I really discovered when I stopped doing 3 hours of radio every day, I went in on my old show with Dave as a guest, vlogging whatever I was vlogging, and I did 15 minutes of a chat with him, and I came out of there and I was shattered.
Yeah.
And I thought, because everything is heightened, you forget how ramped up you are.
Yeah.
And even if you're just having a chat like we are now, which is nice and relaxed, in that live radio environment, it's exhausting. Yeah. You're on full alert mode,
Yeah.
And I really had an appreciation for, that's why I didn't do maybe some of the things that I thought I wanted to do, because a lot of my energy was gone by the time the show was over.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And you're goosed. I mean, and the Late was like that because it's live TV, so it's even more heightened than radio. Radio was like a tea and toast in a newspaper, whereas that was a bungee jump after 15 Red Bulls, and it's a very different thing, and you've got to come down off that too, you know. So yeah, different disciplines. But the bookshelf allows me to meet, and because I record some of them in London and some of them in Dublin, I come home. It gives me another excuse to get home, as if I need one. And then I'm meeting these people like, you know, Brian Cox and Alistair Campbell or Paul Giamatti, David Walliams, all these people who I may or may not have met before. But
Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, nice.
Well, no, that's a terrible impression.
I think that's a good impression.
Of internet impressions of Paul Giamatti.
They do. Okay, yeah.
But I'm so obsessed with him.
He's one of my favourite guests I've ever interviewed.
So for people who don't know, he's in shows like Billions.
Do you know who he is? He's the sort of guy you say, Paul Giamatti, and they go, I've never heard of him. You show a picture and they go, oh, him.
Yeah, that guy.
I've done that a lot with him. And he's in Billions and he's in The Holdovers. He was Oscar nominated for that beautiful film, The Holdovers.
Great film, yeah.
He came in, he sat down, and it was like the best speed date I was never on. we had hit the ground running. We got on so well. We had loads in common. We loved a bit of... we loved Roald Dahl's Tales of the Unexpected. We loved The Twilight Zone, a bit of Star Trek. Oh, we nerded out. We really hit it off. We've been in touch since and everything. He was just a beautiful.
He's a Star Trek fan.
A little bit of a Star, just a little bit, like myself. I just Next Generation, college hangovers, wrapped up in nostalgia. Captain Picard, make it so. So yeah,
I know. Some of my happiest memories are watching Next Generation.
Yeah, Next Generation. That's my favorite.
With my brother and my mother
and your mum.
And there's even a particular meal that my mother used to make something called cornflake chicken, which was basically chicken dipped in egg, covered in crushed cornflakes. Yeah. To some people, it sounds perfectly normal.
Carl Henry.
Does he do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
He has it in his recipe book.
Amazing.
When you said, I immediately went, Carl, I'm never going to make it. I saw it in his recipe book. I said, Carl, what were you on when you were, what did you drop to make that?
But we used to, I associate that meal with watching Star Trek.
Wow.
Because
my
mother,
nice memory.
Years later, we realised that my mum really fancied Jean-Luc Picard.
Amazing.
So, but particularly those episodes where he might be de-shirted, tied up by the Borg or by Q or whatever.
Yeah. We're getting quite an insight into your mum's peccadillos. And you know what I mean?
I remember saying, but Mum, he's totally bald. And she went, I know.
Oh my God. Isn't that so funny?
It's kind of nice to know your mother has a bit of fire in her belly.
Yeah,
She was probably in her 70s
at
that point.
I'll match it with my mother. We're having a glass of whatever, got off of wine, crying, watching Neil Diamond, the jazz singer, you know. I am, I said. You don't bring me flowers. You know, it was really fun. I'll never forget that. Yeah, our mothers are beautifully strange.
Yeah.
We've got that in common too.
But yeah, sometimes it is, you think it's going to be the big holidays or the big events that make you miss them. But actually, it's the kind of banal moments. I talk in the book I'm writing at the moment about something called blind seeing. And I think we can all be victims of that. And I realized, quick story, that I was working on my laptop. My wife came in with the shopping and she kind of dumping bags. And I had glanced up to go, hiya. And she's there taking things out and just talking about her day. And I realized that probably 10 minutes had passed and I hadn't really looked up from my laptop. So I just stopped what I was doing. I closed down the laptop and I looked at her and she just looked incredibly beautiful and obviously sort of caught up in the stuff of the day. And I realized that we can all do that quite a bit with people that we really care about. Yes. That we can see them, but we're not seeing them. You know, you maybe your child can come into the room and you've a sense that they're over by the dishwasher, but whatever you're doing, you're not really seeing them, you know. And that moment, as normal as it is, stuck with me because I was thinking, you know what, if she wasn't around, I think they're the moments I'd miss. It's the talking about your day while unpacking some bags. You know, it's not the big holiday or the ski trip.
No,
they're great and all.
But to chime with that, one of my favorite things is a sound rather than a sight. It's the sound of my girls downstairs getting ready, or you know, running the shower, or exchanging clothes or thoughts on outfits, or fake tan, or you know, maybe in the kitchen just catching up with each other. And I'm not eavesdropping because I don't want to hear their conversation. It's enough to hear the muffled sounds, but I just feel equilibrium is intact when I hear that. Yeah.
Even the footsteps down the stairs.
That's enough.
That kind of
it's a joy.
That sense of
joyful sound.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Have your values changed, do you think, over the last year? Have things shifted in importance?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was always very close to my family, so that wasn't an issue in terms of, spending more time with my family. It's nothing like that. But I think my family, and we've discussed this a bit, if somebody's getting beaten up in the news, internationally, nationally, we tend to ask questions about the victim of the beating, even if they mightn't be all good. We're just going, well, hang on, do we have all the details? Who is this person? How much of this is true? Because we saw so much mistruth and we saw so much poor storytelling but we're very skeptical about what we read and see and who we meet.
And we're so polarized. People feel they got to come down on one side or the other. The old nuance doesn't really get a look.
Not really. So, but values-wise, yeah. Well, I'm a changed person. I mean, I'm a different person. I'll give you a small example, Dermot. I would never have worn a jumper without a shirt underneath it until a year ago.
That's a radical departure, Ryan.
I am a new man. My dad, I was so staid and so wrapped up in my own thing that I always wore a shirt and a V-neck jumper. Always. Or maybe a round neck, but always with a shirt. I couldn't bear the thought of it.
I can hear people saying, "Just, he's very London now. He doesn't even he wears a jumper without a shirt."
Yeah,
if you can believe.
yeah. I mean, imagine that. But I say that by way of saying, strangely, that is a thing. That was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Because, and I definitely do, I mean, look, I know how ridiculous that sounds, but I definitely do say and feel things that are different now than I would have ever done in my life. And I feel very enriched by the experiences I have. I feel like that I know London, that I've been reading about London all my life. All the novels I read now that talk about Clapham or Camden, or I now know where they are, and that's really nice. So just new eyes, new eyes. It's quite interesting.
What's it like looking at the toy show with new eyes? I'm conscious we're recording this at roughly the time of the year. You would normally still miss the toy show, or is it like that was so hectic?
No, I adored every single toy show I did, and I loved every moment of it. But it was time to pass the baton, and so I did.
I'm conscious that I cut you off slightly when you were looking ahead to the next year and things that you'd like to do work-wise and
I'd like to
life-wise.
Yeah, the bookshelf, I'd like to expand it, and maybe go to the States and pick up a few old friends that I've met down through the years and say hello. I've never been to Australia, and I've been invited out, and I might go for a little trip there, which is interesting because I studied Australian history, would you believe, in college. So I know Australia quite well.
Yeah.
But so I'd kind of like to go there, and that's the sort of thing I would never have done before.
It's good to know that you also have a degree that to many people sounds like a complete waste of time.
Right. Greek and Roman history and
I did Greek and Roman archaeology. Yeah.
But what a great thing to do. I loved it.
So did I.
I loved it.
But after you're finished, you're like, I better go and...
Get me to the dig.
Yeah.
Where's Agatha Christie when you need her? I'm going to the Nile. What? There's McDonald's
Did you watch Time Team? Did you like that show?
I never watched it, no.
This was the archaeological show where they would dig up like Roman Britain.
Yeah. Sounds good.
On Channel 4 and that guy, presenter, would excitedly jump from hole to hole.
Tony Robinson, was it?
Yeah.
Baldrick.
Yes, that's right, yeah. I had friends who worked on that show, do you know? And they're fellow archaeologists. And they told me that when they were making Time Team,
don't wreck it now.
They're in the hole for like 2 weeks, scraping away layer by layer. And then they go, oh, there's something cool here. There's a bit of a wall or some pottery. Tony. So then they go, you guys out of the hole, even though they are the ones who'd been digging it.
And bring in Johnny
Then they bring in look what I found here. Do you remember him? The guy with the lamb chops.
I see.
And they go, look, I've just uncovered. So they'd throw a bit more dirt on. And then he'd be brushing it off. Meanwhile, the disgruntled archaeologists are all like, that's my hole. And I dug that. Just that was so unfair.
Well,
that's showbiz.
If we could have a whole podcast series about how programs are made deceptively, but not today. Yeah, so I've got. I think 2025 is going to be a very busy year. I'm starting to get a few knocks on the door about different gigs, and just towards the end of this year, I was running. I had a lot on in terms of work, and so it's going to be interesting.
And sometimes that's the thing about change, isn't it? Sometimes we need to experience the other to appreciate really and put into focus everything that we have.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the great thing about the London experience. It's definitely given me a more worldly view.
Ryan, thanks so
Thanks,
much for
Dermot.
chatting
Yeah,
to me,
and
man.
good luck with the. I mean, it's just great. I loved what you did. The interview on the script.
Glenn Power, yeah.
It was a beautiful conversation, and
thank you.
I think it's and they're two lovely fellas, and when I was listening to that interview you did, it did give, and that's what context. I might have lost a gig and a bit of face, but they lost a friend, and like, come on. Let's get our shit together here, and we know what's important and what's not important, and that is a much more meaningful conversation and lesson to learn in life. But I hope people listening to conversations like this realize that that it's good to talk and it's good to be honest with your emotions. And these are words I never thought I'd hear coming out of my mouth. So even if you're an old geezer like me listening and going, I'd never, what's he talking about? There's always room for change. Just keep an eye out for any strange beings with hoodies.
Beautifully said. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Dermot.